catch him, possibly. You'd think that eventually I would just stop trying to catch him or ignore him or something, but he's so convincing. He's ridiculous. He really looks like he's just going to crash to the ground and get a concussion any day. So even if he's in a doorway, I'm like, I gotta save Hunter. Hunter is really, really good at trust falls. Me, not so much. I'm not big into the whole trusting people to stop my head from cracking against the floor thing. It's just not me. I'm not real big into the whole trust thing in general. I'm really good at doubting. Like, really, really, really good at doubting. Ask my girlfriend. In her life, I don't know how she puts up with it. There have been nights where I'll be like feeling unsure about my future or something. So I'll go ask her, like, can I take a walk with you? And I'll tell her about like the inception layers of doubt that I'm dealing with. Like, it's not at all unusual for me to, I have to read this because I don't know what it is off the top of my head. I have doubts about something, then I doubt whether those doubts are legitimate, then I doubt whether the fact that I'm doubting my doubts is real doubt, or whether I'm trying to convince myself to stop doubting my doubts by doubting them. And that makes perfect sense in my head. And now you don't know why I don't do trust falls. Needless to say, when you doubt your doubting of your doubts, it leads to a pretty dang confused head. That confused head, for me, then leads to all sorts of fun emotional issues. At least for me it does. Trust issues, low feelings of self-worth, confidence problems, clinical depression, being borderline antisocial for about a year. By the way, this is actually heartfelt. Sorry to anybody that I was rude to or ignored in that time period. Like, it was just a tough time and I did not handle it very well. So, side note, sorry. Anyway, I don't mean to make this amazing ability to doubt literally everything that's ever happened sound like it's all bad. It's got its pluses and minuses. I've noticed that people like me, which I like to call professional doubters, we tend to be pretty creative. It's probably a side effect of being able to doubt our entire existence or something like that. But seriously, I think that all that doubting gives us good practice in the skill of stepping outside of ourselves to look at the world through someone else's eyes. When you doubt everything that you yourself think, the search for truth tends to take you outside of yourself. So, yeah, on the plus side, we have good imaginations. I mentioned Inception earlier. You know those movies that just mess with your head? People like me love those movies. Like, absolutely love them. Does anyone here like those movies? Yes. I got a list. Inception, 2001: A Space Odyssey, The Matrix, Beautiful Mind, Memento, Shutter Island, Donnie Darko, The Truman Show, The Prestige, Fight Club, Prometheus. Oh my goodness, Prometheus. That movie messed with me so much. Seriously, if anyone here saw Prometheus, come talk to me. I can talk to you for hours about that movie because so much is going on. I've done it before. Also to my girlfriend, who yet again, I don't know how she puts up with it. Some people really hated that movie, and I can see why. Like, none of the answers, or none of the questions that it brings up are ever given resolved answers completely. There's a lot of questions, and they're big questions. There's no resolution, and it basically leaves you questioning what it all meant in the end. In some ways, I guess that reminds us too much of real life. We have so many unanswered questions in life, we don't want our entertainment to leave us with more unanswered questions. We want to hear a story. But that's not what we get, is it? No. We get pain, we get suffering, stress, fear, heartbreak, confusion, sorrow, hopelessness, existential crisis, feelings of meaninglessness, the feeling that we are absolutely, totally, irretrievably alone in the universe. I think we all doubt. I'm willing to bet that everyone in this chapter has had at least one instance where God feels so far away that it feels useless to pray. You won't hear us. It's pretty common. In the Psalms, the psalmist repeatedly cries out to God, asking why he's so far away. Jesus himself, after being nailed to the cross, felt abandoned by God, which is really interesting because he's a member of the Trinity. A part of God was abandoned by God, emotionally at least. So often we feel like we can't express that aloneness. We can't express that doubt and that fear in church because it would ruin the happy, clappy atmosphere. One of my favorite chapel sermons ever was Dr. Jackson's sermon during the Psalms of Ascent series earlier this semester. If you weren't there, I'll review a bit. Basically, Dr. Jackson discussed in detail the fact that pain, alienation, and doubt are very present emotionally in the Psalms. I don't know the actual statistics, but I've heard that around 70% of the Psalms are laments. Those are sad Psalms, angry Psalms, fearful Psalms, which kind of seems like a contradiction. And Dr. Jackson made the great point that we should follow the example of the psalmist and bring everything to our worship, whether that's positive or negative. And that includes doubt. But think about it, how often are we given the message that it's okay to doubt in church? Ever? I think the closest a lot of us have come is that song we just sang. Give me faith to trust what you say, that you're good and your love is great. That's almost an admission of doubt. Almost. But for some people, that's not enough. There are no songs that say, God, where are you? My father is dying, my mother's an addict, my brother's in jail, I'm suicidal, and no matter how much I pray, nothing happens. When people are using pressure cookers to bomb innocent children at a marathon, where are you? Where are those songs? Would those still be worship? I'm convinced a lot of people would say that it wasn't. Unfortunately, we'd probably be shamed for those feelings in a lot of places. We'd be told that by expressing doubt, we're weakening our witness, that we're being ungrateful, that we're harming the worship of others. And to some extent, that is true. And there's a lot to celebrate as Christians because, there's that whole resurrection, defeated death business. That doesn't mean that we should ignore feelings of doubt and fear that creep in from time to time. In fact, just trying to sweep them under the rug makes it worse, doesn't it? Doubt works like an infected wound. If you show it to a doctor and get proper treatment for it in the first place, it'll heal. But if not, it starts to fester, it starts to itch and ooze, and this tiny little cut starts to affect your entire well-being. Eventually a fever kicks in, you're bedridden, all because we didn't want to share our wounds. Tell me if this sounds familiar. Am I the only one who feels like this? Everyone else talks about how God speaks to them. I have never heard God. Am I praying wrong? Am I stuck in some sin I don't know about? Can I trust God? Has God rejected me? Has God rejected me? I think doubt is an integral part of the Christian life, and it's deeply biblical too. And to clarify, I'm talking about reasonable questioning doubt, not Brendan Inception level doubt like I was talking about earlier. When I say doubting, what name comes to mind?
Thomas.
Thomas. Yeah, good. I was really worried they were all going to say Job. That would change the entire thing. Yes, the famous doubting Thomas. Yeah, the guy who just couldn't believe that Jesus was back from the dead after seeing him brutally killed and stabbed repeatedly. Party pooper. If you haven't figured it out yet, I really, really, really don't like the phrase doubting Thomas. The guy's been remembered for 2,000 years as that doubting guy because of one single sentence he spoke in a moment of absolute despair. According to church tradition, Thomas brought the gospel to India. He converted a large community around the southwestern coast, I believe. But do we know him as evangelizing Thomas? No, he's doubting Thomas. This guy has a terrible reputation that he really doesn't deserve at all. And I think this story has a lot to say to us as Christians struggling with modern daily life and living in the tension between faith and disbelief. So let's look at the story of Jesus and Thomas, which I think should be coming up on the screen. Maybe. Now Thomas, also known as Didymus, or the twin, one of the 12, was not with the disciples when Jesus came. So the other disciples told him, "We've seen the Lord." But he said to them, "Unless I see the nail marks in his hands and put my finger where the nails were and put my hand in his side, I will not believe." A week later, his disciples were in the house again, and Thomas was with them. Though the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." Then he said to Thomas, just Thomas, "Put your finger here. See my hands. Reach out your hand and put it in my side. Stop doubting. Believe." Thomas said to him, "My Lord and my God." Then Jesus told him, "Because you've seen me, you've believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and have yet believed." All right, so we see here that Thomas was approached by the disciples after one of the most, if not the most, disillusioning moments of his life. Jesus, the man Thomas had dedicated his life to and truly, deeply believed was the promised Messiah, had been nailed to a cross and killed. And now his friends come and tell him that Jesus is back and that he appeared to them. That's a sick joke. Like, if you're in Thomas's position, that is really terribly offensive. Like, who does that? Honestly, I'm surprised Thomas didn't just punch him all in the face. Like, really, Thomas saying that he wouldn't believe until he saw physical evidence, like the nail marks in the wound, is pretty reasonable. After all, Jesus did the exact same thing to the disciples. A few verses earlier in John 20:20, John says that after Jesus greeted the disciples, he showed them his hands and his side. So basically, we call Thomas Doubting Thomas because he wasn't doubting at the same time as everybody else. That's a tragedy, I think. Because we've attached a negative stigma to Thomas as the doubter. We've all too often missed out that his story can teach us a lot as Christians. If Doubting Thomas can bring Christianity to India, I think Doubting Brendan or Doubting Hunter or Doubting Josh or Doubting anyone can do something great for God as well. So let's look at the word doubt. Of course, the New Testament wasn't written in English, it was in Greek, so it wasn't our word doubt that was written down. The Greek word in verse 27 is diakrino. It's a verb, not a state of being. Its meaning is something along the lines of to separate from oneself in a hostile spirit, to oppose, to strive with, dispute, or contend. To be at variance with oneself or to hesitate. That same word is translated as doubt, judge, discern, contend, or waver at various places in the Bible. In English, the common thread between all these meanings is that there's some element of conflict between inside the individual or between two individuals. In English, we tend to think of doubt as a lack of something, as a lack of belief, but the Greek word doesn't imply a lack of belief at all, but an internal battle, to strive with dispute. Now, it can be hard to understand exactly what the Bible is saying when it comes to doubt. Like, it was pretty hard trying to find verses for me. On the one hand, we have familiar verses like James 1:6, which says, "You must believe and not doubt, because the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea, blown and tossed by the wind." And Jesus' admonitions to his disciples to not doubt. In fact, in Mark 9:19, he refers to their entire generation as unbelieving, which is pretty harsh. On the other hand, we have passages to show a great love and compassion for those that doubt. For example, in Mark 9:24, which is probably my favorite verse in the entire Bible, the possessed boy's father cries to Jesus, "I believe, help my unbelief." Then there's Jude 1:22, "Be kind to those who doubt." And of course, there's Jesus' interaction with Thomas, which is pretty merciful. He does not scold Thomas or shame him. He greets him in peace and provides him the means to help his unbelief. So combining what we know about the Greek word for doubt in these biblical passages, it seems to me we're dealing with two different levels of doubt, if you will. On the one hand, it seems like some baseline level of doubt is always present in the life of any believer. Otherwise, why would we have books like Lamentations, Ecclesiastes, Habakkuk, Job in the Bible? Those are downers. So honestly, why would they be in the Bible if that wasn't a testimony to that being part of the life of faith? Why would we have lament songs? We have entire books that are testimony to it not being easy, but somehow, all too often, we manage to forget them or ignore them. I don't know. So it seems to me that the unbelief and doubt that Jesus and James speak out against is a conscious decision to not trust God. Not basic questioning of beliefs as shown by the father of the possessed boy, who, interestingly, seems to suggest that belief and unbelief can exist at the same time in one person. The condemned doubt is the intentional, rebellious refusal to believe God. You see a bit of this in Thomas when he says to the other disciples that he will not believe unless he sees and touches Jesus' wounds. What is Jesus' response to that? Reach out your hand and put it in my side. Stop doubting and believe. Blessed are you who have not seen and yet have believed. That's us. Jesus knows it's hard. He says so a lot. In John 6:28 through 29, Jesus said, "The work of God is this, to believe in the one he has sent." Work. Difficult. Hard to do. Work. So basically, we've established that doubt is not intrinsically a bad thing. Just because we doubt something doesn't make us bad Christians. Only making a conscious decision to not believe God is inherently rebellious. But how in the world can doubt be a good thing? We go to church and we're taught all the reasons that we have to believe, and so it's very counterintuitive for a lot of us to think of doubt in a positive light. How does that work? Frederick Buechner, a Presbyterian minister and theologian, said in his book, Wishful Thinking, "Doubts are the ants in the pants of faith." Love that. They keep it awake and moving. The reason I love that quote, besides the fact that it says ants in the pants, is because it does a great job of explaining how two things that are seemingly opposite, faith and doubt really aren't opposites, but more later, really feed off of each other. It's an extension of that old saying about how for good to exist, there must be evil. For us to really understand joy, we must have experienced sadness. So we must choose to believe God. We must trust fall, if you will, into Him and His promises. We must choose to believe the same way that we must choose to worship Him over earth's idols. There could be without the free will that we need to choose to love God over earth's idols, there could be no true love of God. In the same way, without the very real presence of fear and doubt, there would be no true faith in God. Author Anne Lamott has famously said, "The opposite of faith is not doubt, it is certainty." There's the secret. If God's love and goodness were constant and obvious, where would our faith be? How could we do the work of God, which is believing in the one He sent? We must choose. As Joshua said at Shechem, "Choose this day who you will serve." But today, rather than choosing between pagan gods and the Lord, we're faced with a choice between our frail, limited, logical human perceptions and the acknowledgement that there's something far beyond us, and our affirmation that that something, which is God, is worthy of our trust. It's a trust fall. We must trust that He will catch us. So what do we do with this information? We absolutely need to express our doubts and fears to each other and to God. Lying to ourselves and others about having no doubts at all won't help anything. And by the way, if you really have no doubts, that's awesome. I'm not trying to belittle that. That's a blessing. I really hope you thank God every day for that. I'm just making the point that many Christians, myself included, don't have that assurance, don't have that strength of faith, and that isn't a handicap. But yeah, if you don't ever doubt, that is fantastic. But I have personal experience with sharing our doubts and fears with each other, and I can tell you it's terrifying at first, but it's so worth it. God works very strongly and decisively through it. We can't build up trust without trying it out. I bet Hunter still doesn't trust me because I can never actually catch him, but he tries. Every time I've shared a deeply held doubt of mine, I find that someone around me has struggled with the exact same doubt, the exact same fear. By telling them, we give our brothers and sisters in Christ the opportunity to support us and bear each other's burdens as we're called to do by Jesus. Every time I've engaged in being vulnerable and openly discussing my fears and doubts, I've learned so much from my conversations, it's ridiculous. I've learned to trust God to provide what I need to overcome those doubts. Every single time I've learned more about God and myself than I had in months, just from one little conversation. I found that God frequently speaks to us through the people around us, through the people that He's placed in our lives for a reason. It's hard to say that God doesn't answer our prayers when we refuse to talk to the people He's put around us for our support and growth. It's like the joke about the guy who drowned because he wouldn't accept help from the boaters around him and kept saying that he was waiting for God to save him. The boaters were sent by God. So yeah, I'd encourage everybody within the next week, hopefully, to think about one doubt or fear that you've had. Share it with a spiritual mentor or a close friend. If you have a trust and accountability relationship with them, talk about the doubt. See if your friend has experienced the same questions and learn what God has to teach you through them, because He does. He definitely does. Don't go to please do this in a spirit of love. Don't go to your newly Christian friend and talk to them about how you're doubting because you wonder how evil can exist if God is completely good. Theodicy is not an entry-level question. And that's not the same as hiding your doubts. It's just doing it in love, building each other up in faith and love. For an example, like professors at Milligan, Dr. Blackburn, does not go to me and say, oh, well, can you tell me about the Council of Nicaea? No. No. You can tell me about the Council of Nicaea. I know nothing. So why should we go to new believers asking deeply involved theological questions? It's just not loving to do that, which is not the same as hiding the doubt. We have to go to a mentor, a spiritual advisor, at least a peer, to do that. So, do we coop up our fears and doubts and allow them to sit and fester? No. Do we let them run wild and destroy our faith? No. We don't do either of these. We live in the tension between belief and unbelief, between trust and suspicion, between trust and mistrust. We cry to God, I believe, help my unbelief. We lay our burdens and our fears at God's feet and believe and trust that He is good and His promises for us are true. We fight the good fight. We run the race with perseverance. We do the work of God and choose to believe. It will be hard. It will be a fight, and it will bring pain and confusion, but it will be worth it. Besides, God never said the Christian life would be easy. If anything, He implied it would be a lot harder than a faithless life. Christianity is surgery, not a band-aid. There's pain in the process of removing sin. There's pain in the process of removing our separation from God, but it's worth it. We can't hide from the pain. We can't hide the doubt. We can't bear the weight on our own. We have to give it up to God. He will help us. He will save us. He will raise us up, and He will restore us. He will make His face to shine upon us, and He will come down to us. He will show us the holes in His hands and the wound in His side, and He will invite us to touch and see. We who are so unworthy are blessed by God for simply believing. God calls you to touch those wounds today. God calls you to touch those wounds and find your own pain and suffering encapsulated there. He is wounded and hurt just as we are, and He overcame. Let's shout to God and proclaim like Thomas, my Lord and my God. He will turn our mourning into dancing. He will remove our sackcloth and clothe us with joy, that our hearts may sing His praises and not be silent. Lord our God, we will praise You forever. Let's trust God today. With our doubts and our fears, let's trust Him.